Well?
Yes. In the Pacific, we're seeing things like World Wildlife Fund partnering with Cordon Bleu. New Zealand Agency's gone to support sustainable fisheries. World Wildlife Fund's involved in that. And then Cordon Bleu come on board and partner with them to train chefs from Fiji to cook the fish. And then you've got World Vision who partner with Mojo Coffee in Vanuatu, which is a great story. And after the coffee industry was wiped out by Cyclone Pam, World Vision and Mojo Coffee come in and work with local, how you source the right plants, how you harvest and produce and sell overseas and so on. It's also our smaller to medium-sized NGOs like Christian World Service who will partner, say, with a Tongan partner making tapa cloths and traditional mats, selling them into the markets in Australia or North America even, or New Zealand.
Are there any dangers, though, in NGOs being reliant for funding from the private sector?
There are always challenges, that's true, and you have to be aware of them, otherwise you can fall into some traps. And I think the biggest one is simply having a shared goal and understanding that you're there to do development, and the development goal, whether it's poverty reduction, whether it's supporting local communities to be sustainable or so on, you've got to make sure you're on the same page. That's not to say that a private company doesn't have... Everybody has different motivations. A private company getting involved in development will be doing it for a mixture of motivations, probably. One might be good corporate citizenship. Another motive might be that they want market access and they see this as a hook. That's okay. Just be very upfront, clear and honest about your motivations. So I think the biggest challenge is to have a shared goal, even if your motivations are different. And the second one is to coordinate. So you're not duplicating efforts. You're not going into a country like Vanuatu and having different sized water pipes and nothing fits together.
Why is the involvement of the private sector growing? Are they stepping into fill a void left by the government?
I don't see it like that. I don't see it as directly related to the amount or an increase or decrease in funding, government funding to the Pacific.
The Director of New Zealand's Council for International Development, Josie Pagani. A pro-independence leader on Guam says he's happy the island could soon decide the future of its political status. Michael Lujan Bevacqua is the co-chair of the Guam Task Force for Independence, which is part of a decolonisation committee established this year by Governor Eddie Calvo. That committee is expected to submit a report to Mr Calvo within the next few weeks about whether to proceed with a plebiscite during November's general election. Dr Bevacqua, a Chamorro who supports Guam breaking away from the United States, says after a century as an unincorporated territory, the fact Guamanians are now raising their voices is significant. But he told Jamie Tahana it'll be difficult to make Washington listen.
Just recently, we hosted the 12th Festival of Pacific Arts and Cultures, and it was a very exciting experience, but it reminded us of our political status in the Pacific. We were visited by all of these other islands who are now independent nations. And so FESPAC was a big reminder that, in a way, Guam represents a previous historical era, a time when colonialism was common, and in a way, much of the world has kind of come to an understanding that colonialism was bad and we should eradicate it from the world, but there's still mainly small islands like Guam where this hasn't happened. And so for me, I feel like it is time to move forward and have Guam join the world community, as an equal and stop being sort of a footnote to a previous era.
It is a weird situation, though, isn't it? Because it's still your Pacific Island a long way away from the continental US, but Guam does have one of the highest US military enlistment rates. It does have a high level of development compared to other Pacific countries. You've received some stuff from the United States. Is there an Americanness there, and what would happen if you were to become independent?
Well, the great thing about becoming independent is that it doesn't necessarily mean that you become isolated. It doesn't necessarily mean that you sort of cut yourself off. But really, because, for example, Guam has had a long, as you said, association history with the United States, but that history has been very one-sided. So our political development is usually, if the United States wants something to change, then they change it for us. If we request that something be changed, then they sometimes change it and sometimes they refuse. And so the U.S. military increases that they're proposing, they represent another step in that because, the U.S. intends to increase its presence on Guam dramatically, and we don't really have a say in that. And so part of the sort of the movement for decolonization now is also also tied to that idea that this may be our island, but in a sense, the United States claims us as their possession. And so we don't really get to negotiate what happens here.
If a plebiscite does happen, it's still symbolic only, isn't it? The final decision is with Congress, and with their planned build-up, with their plan to pivot to Asia, how confident are you to take heed of whatever result Guam decides?
Oh yes, that is one of the why we can't simply look at this as kind of like a vote alone, but it has to be part of like a large struggle. And so the United States has been very clear that whatever we vote on, it is not binding to them. You know, they will accept it and then they will do whatever they want with it. And so it's really going to be up to us then to submit it to them, try to work with them, but if they refuse, then we will have to sort of make our own plans to sort of make that future possible.
The Guam pro-independence leader, Michael Bevacqua. Palau has become the latest Pacific country to join a regional shark conservation initiative to protect sharks and ray species. Other countries in the region who are also backing the World Wildlife Fund's Pacific Shark Heritage Program include Fiji, Samoa and French Polynesia. Palau became the world's first shark sanctuary in 2009, banning all shark fishing in its territorial waters, and is now looking at banning all commercial fishing by 2018. The World Wildlife Fund's Ian Campbell told Indira Stewart he hopes more Pacific governments will join the program.
We want as many Pacific countries to join up and get together to help them sort of conserve these important species of sharks and rays in the entire Pacific.
How likely is it to get other governments in support of this conservation effort? What are the barriers?
The barriers at the moment is getting to each country to inform them what we're doing. We're currently based in Fiji. It's just getting out to the countries to inform them. Once we speak to governments, they're very, very receptive of what we're doing.
Okay, so the main thing is educating them and letting them know or raising awareness of the rates of decline of the species, especially sharks.
Yes, so I mean, pretty much of sharks being threatened by loss of habitat over programs out there. But one of them getting lost is, as you said, it's not just about losing species. It's about a loss of links to culture and heritage.
Sure. In terms of overfishing being a big threat to the declining rates of sharks and ray species in the region's waters, they're not specifically a fish that's targeted in terms, so it's not like tuna, but they're really just kind of the waste catch. Is that what's happening?
They are and they aren't. So even though fishing vessels can go out and they target species like tuna, you can set your fishing gear so that you do catch sharks, even though specifically you may not say you're targeting sharks. So you can fish for certain species, even though you can say you're not fishing for them. So not many countries do specifically target them, but a lot of sharks, especially in the Pacific, are caught. It's a huge sort of issue that differs from country to country and from regional water throughout the Pacific.
Right,
So,
and how do you monitor that even?
this is probably the biggest issue that we're facing in the offshore industry. Monitoring what's happening on board the vessels is very, very difficult. So the monitoring of compliance to the rules is a huge issue. And also in small countries like Palau, like Fiji, coastal fisheries, you've got small communities. Very, very hard for a small government with an undercapacity fisheries department to go out and see what's happening.
What are the rates of decline in terms of sharks and the ray species that have been threatened in the region's waters? Do you know?
Well, last year the International Union of Nature, their shark specialist group, did a global study on all sharks and rays, and roughly a quarter are threatened with extinction. So what was also a key finding for us was almost half of all sharks and rays. There's no data. There's absolutely zero data on if the populations are healthy, if they're overfished, if they're underfished, nothing. So it's trying to manage the Pacific. One of the big issues is the lack of data. This is why we're getting countries to back what we're doing. Where the more the momentum we can get of islands in the Pacific to really join up to focus, we can assist them. We should start making progress. We can start progress straight away with it. With the lack of data, even getting small data is progress.
The World Wildlife Fund's Ian Campbell. A survey has found young people in the Pacific don't understand the dangers the Pacific have Hazardous Waste Management Program, or PAC Waste, questioned 100 people across more than 10 countries and territories in the region. Its communications manager, Amber Carvin, 10 people under the age of 30 have little to no knowledge about the dangers of the toxic material.
We can target our awareness raising materials to people aged under 30. And we've also learned that for those and above, of awareness, we need to focus on knowledge further, particularly with regard to the fact that our pathway surveys have found that new products continue to be imported into the region. So when we did our survey across different Pacific Island countries, we found at least 2 there were building materials being sold at retail outlets that contained asbestos and necessarily labelled as being asbestos materials. We are running an asbestos awareness campaign later this year, and we are trying to establish knowledge. There has actually not been any research done that we could find, so we were very interested just to find out what people's general knowledge of asbestos is across the Pacific region.
Is it the high amount of asbestos in the Pacific compared to other countries?
I wouldn't say that it's certainly not an unusually high level. What the Pacific region is facing, though, is that we have a lot of older buildings that are quite old. And of course, the weather conditions here just mean that buildings operate at a faster rate than they might in other places across the world. And people might also really carefully and to take precautions when removing them. So it's the awareness component. Natural disasters. So when a cyclone, for example, or a tsunami, a huge amount of waste is generated, and of course, among composed
communication.
The 25.5 from May Heron and focus on politics program. RSZ International in Norfolk Island. RSZ International. We have a change of frequency to moving then to 15.720 kilometers. Though time for focus on politics has used last state of care report to warn that thousands of vulnerable children could be in danger as the government bans the call of child use in the Russell after what the future holds and whether children are better off now.
What the data tells us is the proportion of relative income poverty has gone up. How well? Yeah. So I think we still have a lot of work to do if we think like us to.
Yes.
We been a lot of goals to kids who are in state care, and their stories are so powerful. It's such a privilege. And kids really are honest with us. They tell us often they have fantastic social, but too many have to what they, they, they want the system to have a say in them, to have the plans explained, to have an explanation for that. Too often that doesn't happen. Like placement in the middle of the NC every year for no good reason. That they're too embarrassed with the that's not child thinking. They always tell us that they belong. Of a child talking to my staff whose mum, I had a family that loved me and looked after me, sports games like those kids. Which be putting children who want to be. But when you're really clear they're not getting it right, not to kids, you know, not social them on their own, getting their perspective on what's happening, so they know. It also means that there's some skills that we need. Got to it means we people culturally. It's in some, and they contribute and to being Māori. That's not.
There's obviously quite a few done lots as well. Has been
There are really informed. Population. And 70% kids in youth justice. So we are escalation of Māori. Right. Child, youth and family are spread too thinly. That's into the system. It's not efficient.
That child that seem like two different types of rhetorics, I guess. What makes you think it can, what specifically can be done now?
I think if they have by or special education, making kids they need it. They give us full and love with planning, support can all happen now. Time as the transformation begins to unfold. So people take it right. And you know, yeah, right. In the next year, 60,000 children.
They need something possible.
When I think activity growth and biodiversity and independently is we can bring four different sources, study of children and the in adult and get I have much my tiny team. You know, if we have more resource, we can do more. I just think it's huge children and outcomes getting worse. To be able to and to give and children right. There was in that and we've money. I appreciate that she's got in the care and protection system in our lifetime. The public really want to know. There are very strongly valued, are drawn ears are open. Nice. So an example of I fly yes. Oh. Placenta. So you've got to work with the system you have, people you and intent is trust credible matters. I get, you know, I often people and stop listening. And I think my amazing team are really good at getting alongside and figuring out.
Dr. Russell Wills says after finishing up, he will return back in his home city in Hawke's Bay. Judge Andrew Beecroft currently
here and talk. Minutes to frequency.